I want to talk about the nature of twists, really, because I'm not going to reveal anything, but there are several bumps along the road in this new book. How do you approach that? Do you map those out ahead of time, or is it kind of a serendipitous thing?
No, I think it's instinct because, what's the most boring book in the world? The most boring book in the world is the book in which, everything's fine. Like, seriously, who wants to read that? Rachel woke up, she had coffee, it was a good day. She wrote some friends, she got wonderful letters back. Everything was terrific. Her favorite TV show was on. She had a wonderful meal. I mean, how are you going to write about that? There's nothing to write about there. That's a paragraph, that's not a chapter.
It's a pleasure to be here this evening and to discuss his new novel, Since We Fell, with author Dennis Lehane. You'll probably know him best from his thrillers, including Shutter Island, Mystic River, Gone Baby Gone, Live by Night, all of which I've just described have been adapted for the big screen. It is a thrill to talk with him about, hopefully to talk about him about his literary work as well as his work on the screen and for the small screen as well. Please welcome Dennis Lehane. All right, well, thanks very much for joining us tonight. It's a pleasure to talk with you. But first I want to start off with just how badly do you miss Dorchester?
Dorchester, I miss a little bit. Boston, I miss a lot. I miss Boston. I live in the West Coast now, LA, and that's very surreal. It's a very pretty place to be exiled to, but it's still, well, just weird. I just never thought I'd leave Boston, so it's a very strange place to find myself. And I'm dug in now. My kids love it there. I don't think they'd be happy if Daddy came to them and said, "We're going to go back to really shitty weather and generally kind of a cold northeast environment in general." Just that, but in California is very sunny and very pleasant, and I think they're used to that now. So I don't know that they'd be able to go back to, I don't know, a more kind of aggressive kind of feel of us, which is like, a tight northeast city. They're all kind of, we got things to do, we got places to go, we don't have time to be nice, that kind of vibe. I think they're very used to kind of this, hey. Yeah, I don't think I'm getting out for another 15 years.
So they're built-in Californians.
What's that?
They're built-in Californians.
I believe that my youngest is without a doubt a Los Angelino. I mean, that's who she is now. That's what she knows. We took her back to Boston a year ago, and my eldest, she has mythologized Boston and because she remembers it, and we were walking in the Back Bay, which is a beautiful neighborhood, and it's all like, beautiful old red brick buildings and chocolate brownstones, and my eldest says to the youngest, she says, "Kira, don't you like this?" And Kira goes, "Nah, I hate brick." And my eldest looked at me like she thought I was going to explode, like she thought, that's it, this kid's dead, And I was like, "You don't like brick?" And she's like, "Nah, I don't like brick." And I was like, "Oh, heresy, like you just broke my heart." And the older one's like, "You gotta like brick, Daddy likes brick, you have to like brick, Daddy loves brick." I don't like brick. So that's it, I've lost.
It was fast. It's fast how fast that happens, really.
Yes.
You're dug into LA, as you say. Do you see yourself writing about it as much as or at all?
No.
Never.
No, because, it's been covered, we're talking about some major giants here in the literature world. We're talking about Nathaniel West, Day of the Locust, Raymond Chandler, Michael Connelly, James Ellroy's L.A. Quartet, They Shoot Horses, Don't They?, which is one of my favorite novels, John Fante. There's just a lot of people who have covered L.A. The Michael Tolkien's the player. What am I going to say? I feel like, look, I worked my entire life to make Boston kind of my town. And I feel that way. In a literary landscape, I feel like it's mine, and it's my world, and I understand it, and the map's in my head, and I know the city better than I know any place in the world. So why would I, if my well is still full, why would I cross a field to somebody else's well? I'm good. I can just enjoy LA, but I don't have to write about it.
Do you feel, though, having been away from Boston for, some years, that you're losing that well-known grip on it, or?
Nah. No, it's, at this point, it's so ingrained. Everything is just so, There's nothing about Boston I feel like I don't understand. I go back every now and then and I go, oh, they closed that place or they put up a building here. But beyond that, you know, it's still my town. I go on, you know, I was saying to somebody the other day, I go on boston.com 3 times a day. I follow ridiculous little stories that have nothing to do with me. I'm still kind of plugged into what's going on in that city. And it just gets in your, I don't know, it's just after so much time, I don't know. I don't think I could ever lose that sense ever again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so.
Are there any corners of it, though, that you feel you haven't explored?
Well, it's funny because the running joke among all Bostonians is the same thing. All Bostonians, no matter how well you know the city, nobody knows East Boston. Because East Boston's where the airport is. So the only people who live in East Boston are the people who couldn't get out. And the rest of us are like, we're just driving past that, you know, because we don't want to deal with the traffic. So that's what made actually Mystic River as a movie a very rich viewing experience, because they shot a lot of it in East Boston. And even I was kind of like, where'd they find that place? You know, I don't know it. But otherwise, no, I feel like I know that city. I mean, this book, Since We Fell, I did, each of the books is kind of a love letter to a different part of the city. And this was both a love letter to Western Massachusetts, which is where the book starts, and then to the Back Bay, which is where Rachel ends up. And also to Providence, where I misspent a lot of my late teens, Providence, Rhode Island. So that's in there too.
Mm-hmm. Talking about Since We Fell, I mean, you know, this doesn't feature perhaps the expected level of, you know, violence or gunplay that we might be used to from your previous novels. It's much more Hitchcockian in its own way. You know, did you design this as kind of throwing your fans for a loop?
No, I never try to throw my fans for a loop. I believe very strongly that what I owe my fans, and I take this extremely seriously, I believe Humphrey Bogart's line, all you owe the audience is a great performance. And I believe that. I believe great performance, not half-assed, not kind of giving you what you think you want, not writing the book that's going to help me, you know, pay off the balloon mortgage. I mean, I don't ever want to do that. I take my craft very, very seriously. But now, having said all that, I don't owe anybody the book they expect at all. I just owe the best book I know how to tell. And I can only write books when I'm really passionate about the subject matter. I just can't do it any other way. And so with this, I said, oh, I always wanted to do a Hitchcock. And then I said, I kind of want to try being in the point of view of a woman for the first time in a while. It had been like 15 years. And so all of that coalesced. And then I said, I want to also look into the effects of violence in which there is no gun, there is no hammer, there is no anything. It's a far more insidious and dangerous violence, which is the violence that her mother perpetrates on her, which is much more emotionally and psychologically manipulative and corrosive. And she's a master. I mean, in all of the frightening characters I put into my books, Elizabeth Childs gives me a chill. Mm-hmm. Like when I think about her, I'm like, that is one damaged person, and she went out and had a child. And guess how that child ended up? And so it's an examination of poor Rachel kind of trying to live under the yoke of an unbelievably smart, unbelievably toxic mother.
I have to ask, looking at Elizabeth's character, did you pull any of that from your own maternal experiences? Or, I mean,
if I did, I'd never tell you. I mean, shit, I'm Irish, man. We don't expose. No, my mother was not like Elizabeth Childs, no.
And she is one of the great, I think, you know, mother villains. I put her up there with Livia Soprano, really, in terms of just her insidiousness. That must have been really fun, though, to kind of craft.
It was fun, and I was channeling various people I've known in my life, and I was looking at these people who their entire power comes from withholding, and that's what she does. I mean, she's just a master of just giving her just enough of a taste of warmth or decency, and enough confusion over how her mother actually feels about her. There's a line in the book where she looks at pictures of her and her mother, and she's surprised to see the love that clearly shines in her mother's eyes for her. And then she says, but true to form, it looked as if she was just one step away from reconsidering it. You know, like there's this sense of just Elizabeth Childs is completely elusive. And emotionally elusive people, if you are unlucky enough to be trapped in a relationship with them, in which, if they're your mom or dad, you're screwed. I mean, how do you get out of that? And so there's even one scene where Elizabeth tends to her daughter when she's sick, And she just comes out of nowhere, and it just felt so true when she does it. This cold, really dangerous woman all of a sudden just is being tender to her daughter, and she's wiping her brow, and she's sick, and she says, "We did okay, didn't we?" And Rachel says, "Yes, we did," because in that moment it seems like they did, but that's going to change tomorrow and the next day and to the next day. And it's all about this sense of somebody who destabilizes environments, particularly the emotional environment of her children. And I have had a front row seat for that for some other people I've known. It wasn't me, but I've been able to observe it and be like, wow, like that's a whole level of Livia Soprano that I didn't see.
I have to ask, did the novel then start based with Elizabeth's character, or did you kind of start more with Rachel? What was the base of it?
The base of the book started with Rachel, and it started with this woman. I said, I got to have an agoraphobic woman. What's your fear if you have agoraphobia? My fear, I don't know anybody else's, but my fear personally would be if I couldn't go outside, knowing the way my mind works, I would start to think that people could be telling me anything they wanted about what was going on beyond those walls. And I'd believe them because I'd have nothing to debate. But what if they weren't telling me the truth? And so I started the idea of the book with, what if an agoraphobic woman went outside? And what if she saw something that didn't make any sense to her narrative of the world? Which is that about 140 pages into the book, Rachel finally goes outside and she sees her husband, or what she thinks could be her husband, possibly her husband, reflected in the glass of a building in the rain, getting into a car in Boston when he's supposed to be in London. And then that was the catalyst for the book. Just let that run. Like what, and then what happens? And is it him? And if it is him, what does that mean? And what's going on? What has been going on in the background during Rachel's 18 months of sort of enforced solitude? And that became the kind of run of the book. Yeah.
So do you usually put character before plot?
Yeah, always. But in this book, I will say I got the plot pretty fast. Mm-hmm. And so that made the writing of it very odd. I very rarely write books knowing exactly where I'm going, but I knew exactly where I was going with this book.
Mm-hmm. The character of Rachel, she's a journalist, she starts off. Did you do much research into that world, especially, the trips to Haiti?
One of my best buddies is a journalist, so I checked with him. I checked a lot of stuff with him. I'd call him. He must have been wondering what I was doing half the time. I'd be like, who gives you your assignments? And what do you call a producer who does this? And he'd tell me, and I'd put it in, and it sounds good. I mean, it really does. I just want to say, it really sounds like I knew what I was talking about, and I didn't. The Haiti stuff was just Rachel ultimately becomes, she goes and she covers the Haitian earthquake of 2010, a 7.2 magnitude earthquake that devastated Haiti. And it's the moment when all her personal demons catch up to her in a global sense, because she's in a situation that is completely out of control. God has left the building. And then following that earthquake, Haiti was hit with a hurricane and then a cholera outbreak. And it really gets to the point where you just go, there are some places that seem almost geographically cursed, cosmically cursed. And that's what I wanted her in. I wanted her to be in this pressure cooker where she's looking around just going, could somebody just give these people mercy? And then that leads to a bit of a drug habit and a sort of a disassembling, which I wanted to be a foreign correspondent when I was a kid. And I'm glad I didn't, because I think I would have ended up being a real disaster. But I looked at that situation and I thought, yeah, if I was in that situation, if I was cut off, I mean, Haiti was hell at that point. It was hell on earth. And there was no infrastructure, there was no police, there was no anything. There was just disease and destruction and starvation, and it was a mess. And no water. And I thought, yeah, I'd probably start popping black market Ativans too, which is what leads Rachel down her kind of path towards a breakdown. Mm-hmm. So.
It was interesting also, though, how you captured a kind of sense of PTSD, having lived through that kind of experience. It seems, incredibly nuanced and touching. Did you talk to many PTSD survivors, or?
No, I didn't talk to anybody who has PTSD. I just feel like, again, if you go on these emotional journeys and you think, I think there's a thin line for almost all of us. I think there's a thin line for everybody between being a stable human being and and being that guy who's walking down the street screaming at himself. I mean, I don't think that the line is as hard as we like to think. It's a couple of tragedies away. Mm-hmm. So, you know, and Rachel's already destabilized. Rachel is been destabilized since she was 5 years old. So she puts her stuff together, and she has that great run. I don't know if you guys, I mean, I remember reaching a moment when I was 40, and it happened with several of my friends. We all ended up kind of in the same place. My buddy just gotten back from serving in Iraq. I had another buddy who was disassembling over something else, and we said, is it possible that everything that led us to the success in our life is now dragging us down? Is it the skill set that got us to be where we are now, the thing that is turning into the anchor? And we arrived at the conclusion that it was, that we couldn't live our lives the way we were living them anymore, that something had to turn. And part of that is that sometimes what makes you successful is an insane level of drive and a tunnel vision focus. That doesn't work once you start pulling people into your orbit. Works great in your 20s. Mm-hmm. It's fantastic in your 20s. I mean, I don't think I ultimately really cared about anybody in my 20s. I cared about my work, and I cared about my friends, and that was it. And then you start to pull people into your orbit, and that turns into a different deal. And so I think with Rachel, she's doing great until her early 30s. She's very successful. She's super smart. She's a good reporter. She does everything right, and then she runs into the brick wall that is this sort of global catastrophe and all of these things that she never fixed in herself.
And all the while still, you know, with a hole in her family history.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, she has no idea who her father is. Her mother withholds it. So. But
it's interesting, though, you know, the sense of searching for family, how you define family, that seems to be a running theme throughout your work.
Yeah, it is. It is. I write a lot about that. I think I didn't notice it until about my 7th book, but then I said, wow, there's a lot in here about this idea of how do you define family? Is it what you were born into? Is it your blood? Or is it what you choose? Because yeah, I've got people in my life, I've got friends in my life that are as close to me as my brothers, you know? And so what does that mean? You know, what is family? Because I'm always saying, my kids are always like, you know, I'll be like, oh, we're going to go see Uncle Mal. And they'll be like, is he a real uncle or a friend uncle? And he's a friend uncle. Okay, Daddy, you got to be clear on this. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like they can't quite get it straight, you know? Because they've got a lot of uncles, but they actually only have 2 bloodline uncles, you know, that kind of thing. So,
I want to talk about the nature of twists, really, because I'm not going to reveal anything, but you know, there are several bumps along the road in this new book. How do you approach that? Do you map those out ahead of time, or is it kind of a serendipitous thing?
No, I think it's instinct, because, you know, what's the most boring book in the world? The most boring book in the world is the book in which, you know, everything's fine. Like, seriously, who wants to read that? You know, Rachel woke up, she had coffee, it was a good day. She wrote some friends, she got wonderful letters back. Everything was terrific. Her favorite TV show was on. She had a wonderful meal. I mean, you know, how are you going to write about that? There's nothing to write about there. That's a paragraph, that's not a chapter. You know, books, drama is based on the moment when things go wrong. And so, you know, in a novel, lots of things tend to go wrong because you've got a lot of terrain to cover. And, you know, Rachel does get this beautiful lull where she meets the perfect guy, and there's a nice little honeymoon kind of period in the book. It's very lovely, but, you know, it's me, so you know it's not going to last. I mean, and it doesn't, you know. So.
Well, I know. I was reading it, and I was quite taken with it, and it seems like, oh, this is pretty lovely. But then I was regretting whatever turn was going to come next, because I knew it had to happen. But you just captured such like a happy slice of her life that it was hard to see it take a turn.
Because I wanted it to. I wanted to dive in really strong. I wanted to make it an incredibly romantic connection between her and her husband. And so he threads his way through the book for the first 100 pages. He's in there, but he's not prominent. And then all of a sudden he steps up. And I wanted to make that a really lovely moment. I wanted to give her something great. And I wanted to make it really sexy and fun. And I did. I mean, I worked on it, and it's probably, I think that interlude is like 25 pages. And that's set up for a real reason, so that when when her shock happens, when it's like, did I see him? Did I see him where he wasn't supposed to be? Is he lying to me? Is he actually claiming to be 3,000 miles away, you know, across an ocean, when he's actually right here living another life? I wanted that to just be as shattering for the reader as it is for her. And I wanted you to go, no, not him. You know, he's a good guy, and then drive the book from that place. You know, so that becomes the essential question: what did she see? You know.
I also wanted to say I appreciated the Canada reference in relation to Brian, because that just adds a little bit of a nice touch to his good guy reputation.
Well, I found out I've been mispronouncing his name the whole time, so that was good. I was corrected today on how to pronounce my own character's name by a Canadian, and I said, well, I think you win. You're Canadian. He's Canadian. You win.
That doesn't sound like a Canadian thing to do, to correct somebody on that.
No, they were very nice about it, but they did it. They did it. So.
When you were writing this book, was it between teleplay projects, between screenplay projects? What was it like kind of going between those two worlds?
I usually shut one down and then I work on the other. I don't ever do simultaneous. Like, you're not going to find me writing a script in the afternoon and a book in the morning. That's rarely does that happen. I just shut everything down and do it. It was weird. It was, I think I'm doing so much screen work right now that it is a little strange, but it's so liberating to do prose. And the first 100 pages of Since We Fell are my gift to the reader. They won't show up in the movie. They're literally, they're gone. They're not anywhere near the movie. And it's my way of taking the reader on a journey that is purely literary. I wanted people to go into Rachel at a granular level and follow this journey she goes on throughout the first 27 years of her life, am I 28, where she's trying to find out who her father is and how that will affect her throughout the rest of the novel. And you know, that was a conscious decision to be literary as opposed to cinematic. And my cinematic stuff it's a different thing. It's fine, it's fun, it pays the bills, but I don't have the same pride of ownership. You know, I don't think I've printed a script, and I printed a film script that I've written in the 4 years I've been there. I just add it as an attachment and I hit send. I never even print them out. Whereas the teleplays are a little different. I mean, I have a very vested interest in the work I do for TV, but that's much more of an author's medium. They've let the lunatics run the asylum. So we have direct access. We see our work is, the project I'm working on now, I am never rewritten without a serious discussion. You know, from I'm working with David E. Kelly, and only David. David will pick up the phone. He'll say, look, you know, let's talk about this scene. We would consider trying to tweak it this way and this way. But what doesn't happen is you get your script back and you don't even recognize it, which is what happens in film all the time. So.
Was that the case with The Drop? Were you surprised with
No, The Drop was me all the way, because that was an independent film. And because it was so low budget and I was one of the producers, I was straight up involved in that step by step by step at a daily level. But if you write a big budget movie where you're just one of 150, if not 250 people involved in the process of creating that film, they forget about you. They're like, you know, we don't have time to call him. We're shooting on the fly. Screw it, you know. Or they just panic at the last minute and they hand your script to somebody and have them rewrite it. It happens all the time. I mean, it happened to me on a project 2 years ago. And they were super nice about it. They were like, you know, sorry, we couldn't get you on the phone, so we just had that guy just completely rewrite your script. But we love it. I'm like, there's nothing left. Yeah, but we love what you did. But you threw it all out. Yes, but we love it. You know, it's madness. So.
Was that why, did you have any trepidation then? Because you haven't adapted your previous novels for the screen, except for the short story, The Drop.
Right.
Was it because you were worried about getting sucked into that system?
No, it's because I didn't feel like I knew how to do it. I didn't feel like I was the person to be trusted to adapt my own work. You can adapt somebody else's work and you can be so clear-eyed and heartless. And you go, yeah, that doesn't work, throw that character's, I don't know what he was thinking, get rid of that. You can't do that in your own work. You just go, oh no, look, he's so cute. I loved writing that part. I remember the spring day when I came up with that character. You know, you just can't You can't be trusted. And it took me a long time to get to the point where I felt I could be trusted to look at my own work very kind of hard-eyed and say, this is what's got to go. You'll see there's a moment in this book. There's a lot of riffs in this book. They're in the movie a little bit, but not nearly as strong. There's a lot of riffs in this book on acting, what acting is. And they're connected to the fact that my brother was an actor, and he went to Trinity Repertory Company, Trinity Repertory School in Providence, Rhode Island. And I used to go up there. Me and my best buddy used to go up there all the time because, quite frankly, because he was surrounded by really hot female acting students, and we wanted a shot. We didn't get anywhere. Not once, but we tried. So we'd go up to Providence every weekend, and I really soaked in that stuff. And this book, in some ways, became a book about masks and acting and people who are performing right in front of your eyes. And isn't that what we all do? Becomes a philosophical question late in the book. Aren't we all acting? At some point, don't we always build our new characters and look at yourself at various times in your life or with various types of people, you're kind of changing and modulating your performance. And so there's a crucial moment in the book with a guy who comes out of her husband's past. And that was really rich, and I had a lot of fun, and there was a lot of riffing in there, and there's a lot of the stuff that I learned from watching my brother back in the day, and none of that made the movie. I cut it. We didn't have time, and it was just sort of like, get the information out in a different way. And that was thinking like a screenwriter, not thinking like a novelist. Because if you asked me that 10 years ago, I'd be like, oh, he has to be in there. He's such a great character. I spent months thinking about him, and I'd put him in. So.
It's talking about the screen. So you wrote the screenplay for Since We Fell as well. How much time did you give yourself after finishing the book to do that?
None. I went right in.
Right in.
I went right in because it was like, it's all in my head. Go in now. Blast it out. So I did. And then I went back and then I did another draft of the book. And then I went back and I did another draft of the screenplay. But the first draft of the screenplay, I just didn't even break stride. It was like I sent off the manuscript to my publisher and then I went right in, interior day, boom, right to the script.
What was it about this movie that you felt were so compelled to write the screenplay? Was it just that you were more comfortable in that format now?
I'm more comfortable in the format, and it's a really clean, it's got a clean through line. Mm-hmm. It's got a very clean spine. A woman sees her husband where he's not supposed to be, action begins. Boom. And then I know where it ends. And that's it. And this is all Rachel. If you're an agoraphobic and suddenly your entire world is shifting on you and you got to move, and right from the beginning, Rachel, she can't even get in a cab when we meet her in the latter day, present day, 2014 section of the book. She can't even take cabs. And within minutes, pretty much, she has to start taking cabs. She has to start driving. She just has to she has to dive into the bottom of a harbor. I mean, it's like everything that you could throw at her. It's the Jaws rule. The way I look at it, or it's a very Hitchcock rule. If you know that Brody in Jaws has a phobia of the water, guess where he's going to end up by the end of the movie? I mean, that's Bible, So if Jimmy Stewart, Scotty in Vertigo is afraid of heights, guess what's going to happen by the end of the movie? I mean, so that was it. If Rachel's afraid, I studied agoraphobia a little bit, and I listed all the things that she would be afraid of, and then I threw every single one at her in the next 3 days of the book. So.
Yeah, it's their own little fear factor, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
So the miniseries that you were speaking of, working with David E. Kelley, that's Mr. Mercedes, the Stephen King adaptation. Was there any hesitation, having seen your work being adapted, to adapt another author?
No, because the novels should be done in TV. They should be done in 10-episode TV. It's perfect. I mean, you can even break it down mathematically. Let's say the average book is, manuscript pages drops in at around 500 pages. Well, a 10-episode TV show is 10 episodes, and they're usually 50 minutes each. That's 50 script pages. 50 times 10 is 500. It works out. The math works out. And so to really tell a novel correctly, if you have 10 episodes to do it, man, it's awesome. I mean, we had the ability to take everything Stephen gave us, which is, manifest, it's incredible, and then we got to drill down. So I'll give you the perfect example. There was, instead of cutting, all you're thinking about when you're doing a movie is, how do I cut? How do I cut? How do I cut? How do I get out through here? How do I, slash and burn? With this, it was like, there was a character I fell for who is a really messed up, talk about a messed up mother figure, the bad guy's mother, the serial killer's mother, the throw killer's mother, and Deb. And I just love Deb, and I was like, I can run with Deb. I can do things with Deb, like, and everybody in the room, even when I would pop out the ideas, everybody was like, whatever you do, however you're channeling this woman, take it, And then finally I said, I want to do a whole episode. Deb's an alcoholic. I said, I want to do a whole episode where Deb tries to get clean. And I saw David's eyes pop, and he was just like, that's not in the book. I said, no, it's not in the book, but think what we can do with that. Think about trying to watch her stay off the bottle for just one day with that lunatic for a son, and I said, and we'll put a bomb in the episode. Literally, I have her driving around in a car with a bomb that he left under the seat because he never thought she'd take the car because she hasn't driven in 4 years. And it just became this incredibly rich episode, and the actress, Kelly Lynch, she's belting it out of the park. And it's like, this is what you can do when you're given all of the other stuff that was happening around that time in the novel is in that episode. But I got to then just build this other little beautiful piece within the episode about this woman, this really messed up woman, trying tragically to get sober, not knowing that the worst serial killer in the history of her town is her son living in her house. So it's stuff like that you get to do in TV that you could never do in movies. You go the opposite in movies. She'd probably be cut from the movie. He doesn't need a mother. We don't have time. No money in the budget for an actress. Boom. So it's great.
So despite you having written a screenplay for Since We Fell, do you find yourself being drawn more and more to television work?
I love television far more. Yeah, I do. It's far more my medium. It's where I'm happiest. I have a writer's room, which is fun. I'm not the typical writer's personality. I'm very extroverted. I'm very gregarious and social. And I spent 20 years in my house alone, talking to my dog. You know what I mean? Like waiting for the girlfriend or wife to come home for dinner, just, hey, what's up? How was your day? And then the first time I was in a real dedicated writer's room, Boardwalk was, The Wire was not a dedicated writer's room for us who wrote, for the staff writers. It was for Ed and David, but the staff writers just flew in and out when it was time to break their episodes. So it was kind of a run in the gun room, and same with Miss Mercedes. But the Boardwalk Empire was a dedicated room, and when I was on that, it was like, wow, water cooler conversation, gossip, just sitting around shooting the stuff with people. This is so exciting. Like, I go to work every day. I have an office. Like, I took a picture of my plaque, like outside my door. I'd never had one before. I was like, this is so cool. I got an office and everything, and an amazing view. So I realized right then and there, I think I want to do this, and I do it. And then again, the lunatics run the asylum. You're treated with complete respect in TV. We're the auteurs. We're driving the car. Where on a movie, you're like the house painter. You really are. Or the office building painter would be a better way of putting it.
The person who puts the plaques on the doors.
The person who puts the plaques on the doors. That's what you are when you write a screenplay. Yeah. So.
Was there any nervousness on your part or trepidation about, going from the novel writing world to working on a TV show with The Wire?
Well, first with The Wire, it was a little bit, but you have to understand that The Wire was the architecture of The Wire was built on David's idea that if TV writers knew so much about how to write, TV wouldn't suck. That was David's theory. And so David said, I don't want TV writers. And so he started bringing in people who were untainted by TV. And we had a learning curve, certainly. And I certainly look at the work I did early and go, what did they see in me? But no, we were a whole bunch of people with no real experience in TV. And that's why The Wire worked. That's why it's difficult viewing. That's why it can be hard to get into. We didn't make any concessions to the audience. We didn't know, there's a phrase in TV, writing to the break. We had no idea what that meant. We had zero idea what that meant. Every TV writer who's been writing for one day knows what writing to the break meant. I didn't find out about writing to the break until I was 6 years in. And I was like, people do that? they're like, yeah, writing to the break. How can you not know writing to the break? I don't know. We never wrote to the break. We just kind of let it flow.
What is writing to the break?
Writing to the break is writing to the commercial.
Wow.
You end at your 12.5-minute mark or whatever it is with something that compels the viewer to come back after the commercial. Now, if you watch people who have total hatred of writing to the break, who got power, you'll see it. You see it in Better Call Saul, which has commercials. He refuses to write to the break. Breaking Bad never wrote to the break. And Matthew Weiner, famously on Mad Men, never wrote to the break. I mean, Matthew Weiner would go to commercial on 2 characters sitting there saying, is that a bottle cap? And they just go to commercial. You know, and you'd come back. Or Don Draper would light a cigarette and look out the window, and you'd go to commercial. I mean, there was never a sense of, you know, wait, there's more coming. It was just sort of like, we're going to commercial now because we have to. So people who grew up, good writers who grew up writing to the break, resent writing to the break. I never wrote to the break, so I don't know how to write to the break. And literally was in a room recently where the first show where I might have to write to the break, they came in and they started to talk to us, and I said, that suspiciously sounds like you're asking us to write to the break. And my partner looked at me, and I looked at my partner, and we looked at the producer, and he went, so we won't be doing that? And I'm like, no, we won't be doing that. We can't write to the break. We don't do that, so.
I mean, you said that, said David Simon didn't really want television writers, but did you learn much about the art of television writing besides writing to the break on The Wire?
I learned everything. I learned so much. Look, I'm a novelist, so that means that all of my scripts early on were really talky, hugely talky. And now I say to people, if you see more than a paragraph of dialogue, you did something wrong. You're not doing your job. Go back in and figure it out, because you can't have people just sitting around talking all the time. That's a novel. TV is image-based. It is based on subtleties. Actors can do so much just sitting across from each other at a table with very little. So I'll give you my favorite thing that I did on Mr. Mercedes. I'm writing for one of my favorite actors, the Irish actor Brendan Gleeson, and we came right to the end. We're coming to the 10th episode. He has a final speech. And Brendan had sent me a note about it, and I wrote back, and I said, I'm going to give you 2 versions. I'm going to give you the big one, and I'm going to give you the less equals more version, knowing which one he'd choose. And I said, tell me which one you want, and I'll put it in. And I sent him 2 versions of the same speech. One was, I think, 7 lines on a page, and the other was 3. And Brendan came back and he picked the 3. And I know he's going to kill it. He's going to crush it. You don't have to worry about it. It's covered. He's going to get it. He's going to convey what I need to be conveyed. Less equals more. So yeah, I just think that there's huge differences between writing for the screen and writing books. Writing books is a much different skill set, and it took me really 10 years to feel like I mastered a teleplay.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about having a back and forth with Brendan Gleeson. I guess in my mind, I see the writer as kind of completely divorced from the production of the actual show. Did you have a lot of interactions with the actors, the directors?
No. Church and state, my friend. Church and state. I'm set allergic. I don't go near the set. But Brendan's a titanic talent. And at the very end, it's the final episode of the season. He wanted to send me some notes. I would have been a fool not to take them. An absolute fool. But otherwise, no. I wasn't taking notes from, like, the 5th co-star. Somebody, they even tried to backdoor me once, and they sent me an email, and the actor was whatever. And I was just like, they don't expect me to answer this, do they? I'm not talking to actors. That's a director's job. I don't do that. I write the scripts. That's it. That's my job. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think look, we respect each other, actors and writers, but we are not of the same cloth. It's simple as that. I mean, one's interpretive, one's creative. Mm-hmm. It's a different vibe.
So did you stay away from all the sets of your other films which were adapted by other people?
No, I've been to the sets, but that's where I discovered my set allergy. There's no place more boring in the world than a movie set. There isn't. It's so unbelievably boring. So I waited my entire life to meet one of my idols, which is Martin Scorsese. I mean, he's one of my 3 people I wanted to meet in my life. And then I met him, and then I watched him direct a scene. And it was amazing to watch. But it was literally Ben Kingsley walking across a room as DiCaprio off camera came in and said something. Ben Kingsley, going to lift a brandy bottle, turned and went, huh. Cut. Let's do it again. I watched them do it 9 times. I thought, get me the hell out of here. I mean, it's Ben Kingsley, arguably the greatest actor of our time. It's Martin Scorsese, inarguably the greatest director of our time. It's DiCaprio, inarguably the greatest movie star of our time. And after 9 takes, man, or even 2 takes, I'm moving on. David Fincher does somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 takes. So just to beat the actor out of the actor, as he puts it, I can't even imagine that. And I don't want to be on that set. I don't want to be anywhere near it. I want to be back in my little room scribbling, not knowing any of this stuff goes on. Call me for the rap party. And I probably won't even go to that, but, you know.
So were there any conversations you had with Eastwood, Scorsese, Affleck when they, jumped onto these properties?
Oh, yeah. No, Clint Eastwood and I had a lot of discussions. Clint was really wanting me involved at every step. And that was a wonderful experience. It truly was. It ruined me for the rest of Hollywood because he was so magnanimous and just a gentleman on every step of the process. So Clint kept me very much involved. Ben wanted me involved, but I couldn't. He just wanted me, I think he wanted me around a lot more than I could be because I was working on The Given Day at that point. Once we hired Marty for Shutter Island, I mean, honestly, what are you going to do on a Martin Scorsese set? Be like, oh, Marty, I think I got a better idea where to put the camera. I mean, he's Martin Scorsese. There's nothing to say except, hi. And I met Ben Kingsley, and I had my Chris Farley moment with him because Ben Kingsley starred in one of my all-time favorite movies, Sexy Beast. And so I had this weird conversation with Sir Ben about Sexy Beast, where I kind of acted like a total geek. But otherwise, normally, I'm just kind of like, and off I go. It's just, yeah, so.
So there's no desire for you to direct then?
No, I've directed once. I directed an independent film a long time ago. It's just not, I don't love it. I like it. Mm-hmm. I'm competent at it, but I don't love it. And I really just want to be a writer-producer.
Mm-hmm. Do you see yourself then moving more toward keeping up with expanding on the Hollywood end of things in terms of teleplays and screenplays, or keeping the balance between the Hollywood work and the novel work?
I want to keep the balance. I want to produce a book every 2 years. If I don't write novels, I shrivel. Yeah, I'm serious. It's so tied into my identity that I one of the truest lines I ever wrote is in Mystic River, and it's Sean says to Annabeth, Sean the cop says, she says, you're an interesting man. He said, I'm not an interesting man. He said, you take away my job and I disappear. I remember getting a chill when I wrote that line because it's true. It's just I am so locked. My identity is so locked into being a prose writer that if I don't write prose for a while, and by prose I mean fiction, mm-hmm. I get very antsy and just impossible to live with, and yeah, ugh. So no, there's no worry that I'm going to stop writing novels.
Do you have projects that you kind of use as stopgaps that you just to get that bug out, to get the prose bug out, and then maybe toss aside for a little bit?
No, I don't. I have then in my next novel, I'm stewing it in my head, and when I finally feel like it's got legs, I'll sit down and I'll start writing. Mm-hmm. It's just, I scribble in notebooks and I carry moleskins everywhere, and I do all that. But once I'm ready to write, I'll just write. I don't just write something and then put it aside. Yeah.
Now that your novels have been adapted for so many films, did you find that when you were writing Since We Fell that you could cast whoever might be ideally playing it in the future?
No. And I'll tell you, that's because the people who do that, and I used to do that after I finished a book years ago, I would do that. But then once I got to know Hollywood and really how it all works, that's insane. You have to understand, it takes so many pieces to get somebody into a role that to think in your head, oh, this would be perfect for so-and-so, is just a recipe for heartbreak and disaster. And the first script I wrote when I came out to LA was an adaptation of a John D. McDonald book, and it had been kicking around for 10 years, and then I finally kind of broke the code, and I wrote the 11th draft of the screenplay for somebody, and that got it. Got a director almost overnight, then it got a cast, then it was set to go, and it was literally, here we go, and it was, I think, 3 days before filming. And Christian Bale, who was playing the lead, blew out his knee. And once he blew out his knee, it was over. You have to understand, they didn't replace him, they couldn't replace him, so then he's out, and then all of the other people connected, they're only there for 40 days, they're on a clock. And the moment that clock starts ticking, it's over. And so the director went off and he directed the Hugh Jackman Wolf movie, whatever that was, Logan. And the actresses all moved on to other things, and the actor moved on to other things, and Christian Bale healed his leg, and the project is dead. It's just dead. And you have to understand that that's how it works, that it's like, you can say, oh, I want that actress. And it could be like, well, yeah, but she has a bad relationship with the director, or the producer doesn't like her, or she's actually going through, exhaustion right now, or, whatever it may be. But there's a million different reasons somebody will say, that's not the one for this part. So I don't control it, I don't think about it.